comes back a few months later, asks to talk to the busboy. He's not here. Long story short, he's the manager of the place now. How did that kid go from busboy to manager in a matter of 6 months or whatever it was? Worked his ass off. Okay? And it's a proof that all you have to do is show up, do your job, and you crawl up the platform. I literally heard 2 people talking in Walmart about it. One, she started crawling up the ladder. She was telling her friend, I'm listening to this, telling her friend what you have to do. You got to be proactive. You got to come in. You got to, hey, what can I do? Her friend was like, I don't want to do that. That's the difference. It's what you want. It's being a little uncomfortable maybe, but you get to crawl up the ladder. It's just a starting point. We're not asking anybody to stay at a minimum wage. Nobody should stay at a minimum wage. It's a beginner's platform, right? What's going to happen when AI replaces all the people in the tech world? Their degree goes out the window. They're going to have to take a big hit in their pay and go find somewhere else. But watch them. They will, and they will crawl their way back up. I mean, to say that we're expecting people to work for minimum wage is a joke. Let's pay more for our food. Let's pay people more. We're figuring it out in California. What they do is raise it up to $20 an hour. Let's find out how many jobs get cut. You want to know who the number one, they say the number one demographic that's most affected when they raise wages or when they raise it to minimum wage on fast food? Black single mothers. Look it up. They're out there working their ass off. Some of them working 2 jobs. They get their hours cut. They get cut loose. You can't just raise it up blindly. Go look and see what fast food costs now. When they do that, the cost of fast food goes through the roof. Okay, great. People are eating there, pay it. That's what happens is we want to pay more people more money. It's going to cost all of us more. Suck it up, and that's what we got to go with.
Do you think some of that cost, Corey? Like, I hear you. Yeah, start entry level. I mean, of course, there's very limited growth for everybody to get a piece, but I guess it's survival of the fittest. What about, do you think part of enabling minimum wage to go up would be potentially trying to address CEOs that are making 100 times the salary of their lowest earner in their company?
I think it could be some of that, but you also have to look at the guy who's at the top is there for a reason because he's damn good at it. He's turned a company, and I don't know McDonald's numbers, but just throw it out there. All of a sudden they went from, what did he take them from? 100 million.
There's different sacrifice and risk. You like people as in an entry level position. Being a CEO of a certain company, you could end up having to fly to Washington to testify in front of Congress. You could end up to go to the New York Southern District, and have to go into federal court and answer ultimately for, a network of what people entry level did in terms of exposing the company to liability. So, I mean, there's just, the stakes are just simply higher. I think that CEOs should be paid what they're paid. I mean, like, what are we talking about? People get caught up in just the everyday and the discomfort of what they have to go through as opposed to the stakes of what their position means, the overall sacrifice behind it, and the overall liability in holding that type of position.
Yeah, and you know this, Adams, too. I mean, me as a general manager of a company, my job didn't stop at 5 o'clock. It never stopped. I was specifically told, you represent the company 24/7, 365. That's it. Everywhere you go, always remember that. You're the face of the company. So I didn't get to go at 5 o'clock and just go hit the freaking bar, get drunk, and get a DWI big deal, right? No, my job is done. Cut. Cold play. The guy just gets caught with what? Some other chick. It's not his wife. Lost his job. I mean, would you be okay with the average worker losing his job because he cheated on his wife? Most people would say no. The CEO did. Nobody cares though, right? Because he's a CEO. He made plenty of money. There's a whole different burden when you get to that level.
Business, right? You raise the prices incorrectly in certain type of industries or in certain type of areas, you go to jail. I mean, like it's very different in the level of exposure behind your decision making. That is different from a CEO than that of an entry-level employee. I'm sorry. And yeah, in certain industries, it may be a little bit different, but for the most part, that's why the expectation is that CEOs are just simply paid more.
maybe you or Roger know this. They always tout this one as having a higher minimum wage than America. But the reality is when you dig into it, there actually is no minimum wage. The government doesn't set a standard minimum wage there. What does that do? Now you literally have the companies vying for the best workers. So they pay more and a little bit more. Oh, I got to outdo them, so they pay a little bit more, right? Here, you literally have a company start up, and they know there's a workforce out there that's not skilled. I can start it at, I don't even know what it is right now. What is minimum
wage? There is
wage?
a federal minimum wage. What are you talking about?
Here. But there's a country, I don't remember if it was the Netherlands or where it is, but everybody talks about how their minimum wage is higher than ours. But when you dig into it, there is no federal minimum wage there. It's just naturally lifted itself because.
Well, Roger made a very good point earlier, Corey. You know, minimum wage is it's all based on skill set and just the nature of the job that you're the work that you're performing. So I mean, when you look at minimum wage and somebody working at McDonald's was not a job that was designed for people to raise families on. Now, I understand that, you know, situations happen, people get sick, you know, people lose their job, they have to have something in between as a cushion, you know, or maybe perhaps in the holidays they want to get something extra. But the reality is the nature of that type of work and the skill set that's required behind it, where it would make sense for somebody to hold that job, is not a profession that's consistent with raising a family and retiring. That's just reality.
And that's kind of where I was going to start going earlier, and I kind of just stopped. But we have people that live beyond their means too. You know, as Americans, 90% of the country lives beyond its means.
Well, but what does that mean? So it's not just what you're earning versus what you're spending, but it's also the skills that you have and the taste that you've acquired. You see what I'm saying? And that's where I go back into, you know, people who can barely speak English. You know, not from, you know, English being their second language, but I'm talking about kids that were born here in America. You know, there's always full of rooms where people feel like, you know, they should have reparations and they should have a brand new Bentley in their driveway, but they can barely speak English. You know, what do your skill sets command for you to acquire a certain type of taste, to know and guarantee that you have some level of skills to be able to aim and successfully acquire gains from those skills?
Hey, can I just recite what the Declaration of Independence says? The phrase eat out their substance means to exploit and impoverish the colonists by draining their resources and wealth. Eat out their substance. That's what our government is doing to us with income taxes, property taxes, sales taxes, import taxes. All these taxes are eating out our substance. They are taking from us what we create, what we produce, and it's insane. The government is literally spending $1 billion an hour. The federal government is basically spending $1 billion an hour. Do you think maybe $500 million an hour is substantial to fund federal operations? I mean, does it have to be $1 billion every single hour? Could it maybe be like $750 million an hour? Because I just get the feeling that spending on our behalf $1 billion an hour, it's just a little too much. Maybe like 20% cut, 30% cut. Do you think it's possible?
I've talked about this before. Before COVID, I think the budget was like 3.8 or 3.9. I think 3.8 trillion, something like that. Okay, we put in $3 trillion to help with all of the COVID spending, sending out checks to everybody to give them extra money since they were staying at home. They had to eat more or something. I don't know what they did for, but anyway, they did that. COVID's done. The budget's 6.9 trillion. We never lost that $3 trillion. It just happened to stay in there. And I would love to know where and why. But nobody's asking. Nobody's demanding answers. No, that was last year's budget coming into this year. Right? Now, most assuredly, this next year's budget is going to be even higher yet. Right? There ain't going to be any money cut, even though we cut, you had Doge in there doing things. Doge, having him be in there for only a limited number of days isn't ever going to get the job done. That job should be a 24/7, 365 job. Get it done. I loved when you hear, the people that were attacking these people, because some of them were young. These guys are prodigies. These guys have done more by 19, 20 years old than most people are going to ever accomplish in their life. We need to continue that. I'm with you. It's until the spending. I mean, everybody in here has kind of been championing it. You got to cut spending. Spending's got to come way down.
Well, and this is what I'm saying. It starts from people feel like it starts from the top down. It goes from the bottom up. When we adopt a society to where we take our own spending seriously as a society, and that's why I went back to my question about what does living outside of your means? Because yes, financial resources are one part of means, but the ability to cultivate those financial resources are another side of means. So until we develop healthy attitudes in congruency with both, I don't think that anybody's going to have any type of meaningful voting power to compel anybody who has control over our government spending and correcting that issue. Does that make sense, Corey?
Absolutely. I just, unfortunately right now, we can go back to what we talked about a little while ago where they keep people battling each other. Maybe that was on a different room, but keep people battling. And then we talked about it here, I think. And when they have us battling, they can continue to do what they want to do. We continually put in people. Let's just use Maxine Waters. I can't remember the guy's name that ran against her, but he lived in the community that she represents. He served 2 tours in Iraq. Showed the house that, he had literally gang fire shooting into his home, walked the neighborhood, still lives in that neighborhood. And at the end of his commercial, he was standing in front of her house, which he shows on a map is several miles away, not in that district. But yet they kept putting her in, and yet he showed all the statistics, the crime, all the stuff that had happened, unemployment, everything down. She had done nothing for them, and they keep putting her in. But you have somebody who lives in your community, and you don't put them in. And that's all because of government money. Let's be real. They're putting the money in there to put people in there. And until the voters, if the vote even matters anymore, until they start saying, no, we're not accepting that, we're putting in. I'm going to be honest, I think AOC's an idiot, but I'd rather see her in there than some of these other freaking con men, Get somebody who really represents you, who you believe sees things like you, that has values like you, and all of a sudden you start changing it again from the bottom up. Because we aren't going to convince a politician to go cut $3 trillion out of the budget. They're just going to say it's impossible.
You're right. Because again, given the attitudes of the average consumer and the average American, they don't see an importance of even making that request of seeing a need to cut back that spending.
But we can go even a little further. What is our GDP? Okay. Sure, it's constantly growing, but let's think about what it would be if we were manufacturing. But everybody says, well, we can't manufacture. Wrong. A large chunk of our GDP the last quarter came from manufacturing. Oh, and I think it's 75%. It's close to 75% of manufacturers in this country are under 19 employees. We're manufacturing like crazy. We just outsourced the big manufacturing to bigger companies over where? China. If you look at the buy local and you ever hear them explain buying local and your money, how it goes through your local economy, how many times over, it's that residual effect of it compounding that starts to make a difference. And until we start bringing manufacturing back and demanding more, this is going to be a continual process because guess what? Manufacturers actually pay pretty well. 93% of manufacturers in the United States are giving their employees health insurance. Now imagine that. All these people that are complaining about you don't need a whole lot of skill. They will train you to manufacture whatever it is they're doing. And we could literally start putting people in positions where they can build themselves a future, work themselves up the ladder, become a manager, become a general manager. But until we start bringing jobs back and we're okay with outsourcing, let them build it. You're okay with literally, you're fine.
It's not a matter of okay with outsourcing, Corey. It's a matter of like our generation, like the millennial and the newest generation going into the job market, they don't have any interest in staying and building a career by ascending into those positions. They don't.
Listen, can't we all just agree that there's one problem and it's a major problem and it's your government? It's not your generation. It's not your fellow citizen. It's your government, which is literally ruining the party. They are a they're a silent partner that puts up no money in your business, but yet demands revenue from your business, and they're eating out the substance of your life. It's been like this, but it's only going to get worse because 25 years of growing this debt from 9/11 to 2025 at $40 trillion, ladies and gentlemen, it only gets worse from here unless we do something. There's some type of reform or some type of consolidation or negotiation. Like America, the government is
Edmund,
going to have to negotiate these
Edmund,
debts. There's going to be a debt settlement.
Edmund, the country is only good as its people. Okay, if you have a bunch of irresponsible people that don't recognize what's happening and control their spending themselves, you're not going to get the government on board with making better decisions for those people.
I'm just saying that, if you talk to McZed on here, he believes there's going to be a debt jubilee. Well, if the debt jubilee is in 2050, but we just keep growing the debt, from 2025 for the next 25 years, which is the most likely outcome. I mean, this is why I'm running for Congress. We have to raise a stink and raise the conscious awareness of the fact that we are kicking the can. This is not a kick the can down the game road to play. If you played the game kick the can when you were a kid, it's. I'm just saying that we have to accurately diagnose and describe the situation, and we can't just revert back down to our fellow citizens suck, therefore our government sucks. That's not a solution, and that's not optimism, and that's not intelligence. And I don't think that accurately describes the situation. I think your fellow citizen is inherently intelligent, but they have been duped and they have been fed a bunch of fucking lies, and they are hyper conditioned to accept a set of rules which are completely unfair. The founding fathers, as Mojo said earlier, went to war over a tea tax, which literally, I think at the time it was like 40,000 pounds. It was like nothing. It was like $1 a day they were fighting over. It wasn't even that much. It's the principle of taxation and getting to keep what you produce. If they're taking 60% of what you create, that's not freedom or liberty. That's indentured servitude. That's slavery, and it sucks. And it's only going to get worse for these next generations because the debt pile has grown so high. It will demand the population to service it.
Well, that's why they silenced everybody that started talking about the fair tax. One of the first questions the politicians asked was, how does that create more revenue? It's not. It's a revenue neutral system, right? You're not there to try to create more revenue for the government. We're there to keep the government funded to do the things that are necessary. The one thing that used to piss me off is you're going to start blockading and putting up security around memorials and parks that are not manned. But when the government shuts down, now you're going to man them and keep people from going in. This is the kind of the lunacy that we have running this country. And until we start demanding things like the fair tax, guess what? It's 33 pages long. When you go to work, 100% of your paycheck comes home with you. You pay tax once. You get rid of the IRS. Go look at how much the IRS costs us each year. Okay? It's ridiculous. You get rid of it. Don't need it. Why? Because we already have a system in place to do the job that needs to be done. It's called the Department of Revenue. They collect excise tax already. The same people collecting excise taxes are the businesses. It's paid at the end. They went through and broke down what it would cost. The cost savings would be, I think on construction, it was 28%. That's what construction costs would go down by eliminating or by implementing the fair tax. There's no cost. There's no more doing your taxes April 15th. There's no more write-offs for big companies. Everybody should like that, right? If you got to buy a new truck, it's a cost of doing business. Sorry, but you're not paying any taxes. You get to buy that truck tax-free. Your product gets taxed at the very end, and we pay that. We pay it one time, and you know what you're paying. They started doing that. They started running that at those numbers. All these accountants of the biggest companies are like, this system makes too much sense. That's why the guy who wrote it, helped write it, said Congress will never pass it. He was a member of Congress. He said they'll never pass it because it takes away their power, their influence. Now they can't go and say, hey, we'll give you a tax incentive, but you're going to kick back to my campaign. You know, this is what we got to get rid of because that's where it's all going wrong.
Well, it's been a kicking the can down the road for a very long time. But this, I honestly, I mean, there's this movement to end the Fed, and if they end the Fed and they deconsolidate it, and let's say they absorb it into the United States Treasury, and let's say we go back to a gold standard or a silver standard, and we have hard money assets versus infinite fiat currency printing, it creates this double jeopardy or this double bind for us, where it gives us the ability as an elected representative to go to essentially a third party and you know borrow on behalf of the people an exorbitant amount. We have to remove the temptation, in my opinion. You could say that temptation is a great resource, but the truth is it's immoral. It's unsound and immoral, currency manipulation. And I love how Trump, in his first administration, kept saying that China is the biggest currency manipulator on the world. It's so ironic. That's like a perfect example of projection. They're not the biggest currency manipulator. We, the United States of America, and our Federal Reserve, which isn't really ours, I mean, supposedly. So I'm just saying that we have to remove the immoral temptation. If the Congress and the Treasury administered over the budget and drafted the currency as opposed to using this third party, it has perpetuated us into the position where we're at now. I mean, imagine if we created a new Federal Reserve and we called it the United States Treasury American Reserve System. I mean, what's to stop us from creating a competitor with the Federal Reserve? Because it's so unnatural and inauthentic to begin with. I mean, in my opinion, internally in the United States of America, we should launch economic opportunity zones, just like how Saudi Arabia, Dubai, United Emirates, those cities that flourished out of nowhere. We create essentially an America 2.0 internally with a new set of rules and a new arrangement, which is the preparation for an eventual collapse of what we could call the United States government and the fiat currency system. I think, if we're going to be innovators, and in big business, they have these angel, what is it? There's a term for this, like in, big tech or evangelists, essentially. We need entrepreneurial evangelists for the government because they're that irresponsible. I mean, there has to be some type of preparation, for a new constitution and a new internal government within the country for economic development purposes. Tax-free zones in preparation, for a potential collapse. I mean, this is like essentially creating a new corporation, knowing that the previous one is eventually going to go into default and bankruptcy and liquidation. It's an idea. I mean, what do you think about that concept, Mojo? Is to prepare a new America, to make preparations for it.
I go out on a limb and say I don't think he was listening.
Corey, what do you think? Do you think it's a viable idea to create a new spin-off, a new business out of a dying business, which is drowning in debt, and it's only going to increase the debt?
Oh, I think it's definitely time to completely, change things up. That should have never been more clear and I don't remember who it was, if it was Schumer or I can't remember who it was, but they made the comment about, of course, paying more taxes or whatever because they can spend it better than we can. That should have been the first sign right there of what their real agenda was. I don't care what side it was. Maybe it wasn't Schumer. Maybe it was a conservative. I just thought it was Schumer. But that should have been the first sign. It's time to out with the old and with the new. And we do need to change things up. I don't know that the two-party system is officially or is efficient at all. I don't know that any of the other ones out there are any better. But yeah, I would be all for burning it down, keeping the Constitution, keeping everything in place, burning it down, and starting over. I think a lot of let's be real, everybody's freaking about the Department of Education. Our scores have gone down since we've had it. Why is this acceptable? Why are we not going to the countries that lead in math and science and going, what are you doing? You know, what do we got to do different? If we're not leading, we should be asking why not, and we should be figuring it out. We spend more than anybody on education, and so to me, that's why I don't mind Trump burning some of this stuff down to the ground, because you have to. People are mad about the job cuts.
Hold on, our higher education is still better than anybody in the world.
Our higher education, but where are we at with our scores for our grade schools?
It's in the toilet, but that's because we have a bunch of people that should have never had kids sending their fucking couth children to a classroom, and then you don't give any tools to the teachers to rein those little brats in. So there's a lot of fuck ups in K through 12, but the people that do pay attention, they get an opportunity to go to the greatest university system in the planet. I mean, it's expensive, but there's nowhere in the world that has better universities than we do.
That's one thing that I do really respect about what you said earlier, Roger, about that whole charity, not charity fiasco, is that, there are very few people that complain about these things that actually do something about it. And I feel like those are mainly the same type of people that, otherwise, instead of complaining and not doing something about it, could otherwise be helping their kids with their homework and improving their test scores. I'm not saying you, Corey. I'm saying like in general, just in general. You know what I mean?
So if they
go ahead.
I was going to say, if they do get rid of the Department of Education, like here in Chicago, the Chicago public school system has a $750 million deficit right now. So, that money is basically just like a transfer from the federal government to states, and they redistribute it. But we're already paying 65% of our property taxes to the teachers and to the facilities to manage this educational system. I mean, how the fuck is it not enough money already just from property taxes? How is the Department of Education backdropping and filling these budget gaps that these cities and states don't already have enough money from property taxes? So
here's the problem, is that between the pensions and between the cost of running the public school system is astronomical, and that's why school choice is so important. Because if you want to really compare what is more efficient, you have to look at how much money actually makes it into the classroom. And by into the classroom, that means on materials and the salary of the teacher. When you look at like the pension, the retirement fund, and you look at construction, and you look at all of those administrative fees, it's fucking insane. That's why school choice is so fucking important.
Jason, if you were made president of the United States of America, what would you do for we the people?
Oh man. Yeah, gun everybody. I would declare everyone in the militia, and none of the gun laws would apply to them anymore. But that's just the first thing.
So what would you do? Would you just send out a voucher that they would go cash in to get a gun?
No, I'd just say, look, you're on the militia now, so if you need any paperwork, let me know, and then you can go to FN or, Barrett or whoever, and you want them 50 cal machine gun, sure, you can get it. ATF will process that for all of our militia members, right? So the idea is I'd introduce a new, plane of the law, and the idea is look, okay, sure, people are banned from buying guns, but not if they're in some kind of federal service, they're not. And I'm going to put everyone in federal service. So there you go. But then I'd also fix the school system and introduce the school of the forest. We built all the schooling around combat engineering. The kids would spend a lot of time outside, we would have physics, but it would be like, okay, we're gonna build this like structure with wood and put like all these sandbags on it. And when is it gonna collapse? Kids, we gotta figure this out. So we'd like introduce all the math and equations in the context of that. And okay, girls would be bored, but who the hell cares about girls anyway? They always figure things out on their own. So yeah. No, I don't know. They wouldn't get bored until like probably 15. Then they get bored of that stuff. But I don't know. We have dance class or something.
So how would you adjust the budgets, Jason?
Yeah, it may not be possible to do, but I would also try to kill all the social services. But I would try to do it gradually. Like Social Security tax will go down, I don't know, a tenth every year. The benefit will go down in some scalable way. So hopefully within 20 years, like no one is on Social Security and no one expects to be on it and no one paid very much for it. And same thing with Medicare, Medicaid. I mean, we just have to stop trying to pay for all these kind of things via the government. It's not that, I mean, should people have pensions? Yes. Should they have retirement? Yes. Should the government give them pensions and retirement? I don't see why. Same thing for health insurance. I mean, you can have a private health insurance system that's functional. I don't see why we did this exactly. But, I would get in there and obviously there would be a lot of details and I would have to sit down with a pen and pencil before I could really say anything definite. But my sketch... Yeah, go ahead.
Jason, I got a question. So if the government can print the money to be able to spend $2 trillion more each year than we collect in taxes, isn't that evidence that we don't need to collect taxes?
Well, I mean, but the government would just print even more money if we don't collect taxes. See, the printing of the money is another tax, right?
Correct.
It is. Yeah,
Correct. But
so,
what if we just what if we just gave people a vacation from taxes, and just said, well, hey, we're going to fund the government with just printing money. Why not do that?
Well, that would be efficient. I think it would be a very regressive tax. It would hurt most the holders of cash, and it would effectively be a massive tax on the poor people, as you have been up there. Poor people who have, moderately poor people who have any cash, obviously. That's the real problem with it, because the salaries are not going to go up to keep pace with it, I guess, unless we get used to that level of inflation. Which who knows what that would be? It'd be like 5% inflation or something. Something, higher than we have now. Our inflation is actually higher than we say it is, but take the real inflation and move it up that much as well. And so it would hurt holders of cash. It doesn't, and it is, I mean, a pretty generic tax on the economy for everything. Whereas I would hope good tax policy would tax specific things specifically, but maybe you disagree.
I don't know if I agree or disagree with that. I know that what we're doing today is not sustainable, and I think the more that we talk about that, the better the chances are that we come up with a solution that might actually work. But I'm of the opinion that we need to immediately try to start fixing it, or we should accelerate the collapse. I think the worst choice is to just keep doing what we're doing today.
Yesterday you kept using the term a slow death, and I got to tell you, I think that's actually the optimal way to service the debt is to die slowly. I mean, think about your own personal life. Would you rather live a long time, and make it to 90? And I mean, you see the logic in that? It's basically frugality. So I think that's the optimal way to go, and I think that's what the status quo really is. It is a slow death, and then when you
Right,
die, it's a surprise.
that works for an individual that's slowly dying. But when you're talking about an economy, what's going to happen is when it does accelerate, when it gets to a point that it is accelerating, and then the collapse comes, we're creating the conditions where our kids or our grandkids are the ones that are going to have to suffer for our foolishness.
No, I agree. It's not responsible. I know, I don't know if you've ever actually started a business, but I have launched and started many different businesses, and it is not easy. And anyone on this stupid app who, is for government borrowing and spending and has never actually started a business, all they've ever done is be an employee or some federal wage earner their whole life. They have absolutely, and Elon Musk said this in a speech when he was helping Trump. He said, people have no idea how hard it is to create value, real value, and to make a profit, let alone with all the regulation and compliance you need to adhere to successfully run a business. A good example would be a pizza parlor. It's a very simple business. You make a pizza, you warm it up, you sell a slice of pizza, or you sell the whole pie. Most people will never in their life ever create any kind of business, that's an actual storefront. Maybe they'll have some kind of digital shop or something, but it is very difficult to actually start a successful business that's legal and that's not deceptive or fraudulent. So to think that we're fucking 37 trillion in debt, spending $1 billion an hour, and there's no recourse. But that's why I say there have to be some kind of debt resolution, an agreement, a meeting of the minds between the borrowers and the lenders, aka our elected representatives. So I'm just saying maybe there's not a speck of dust out of place in the whole universe. This is what I was going to ask you, Mojo, is do you think the Federal Reserve and dollars and debt is actually just a form of political communication? Because it's my belief that we don't have to fear dollars or money. It's all essentially communication. When we start stabbing each other and shooting each other over debt, like, okay, then we have a civil war and we have a problem. But in the meantime, do you think it's basically political rhetoric?
No, it's not just that. I think there's more to it. I think that it's it's just a problem that we've delayed. Where we're going to delay dealing with the problem, and so I don't think it's just communication. I think it's an action which we're going to be waiting for the reaction, and I think the reaction is going to be pretty scary.
Well, what is the reaction of the Federal Reserve or of the U.S. government? I mean, and do you think there is an actual separation between those two organizations?
They claim that there's a separation, but there certainly is a lot of influence. I mean, these conversations between Powell and Trump have been illuminating. If it's separate from the federal government, then why does the president have so much goddamn influence over it? I'm in the Fed camp.
Well, I like how Trump says, Chairman Powell's a very angry person. So, he's punking him and he's doing a great job of it. But he didn't budge. He didn't drop the rates. Why does one guy and supposedly his board of governors get to determine this artificial rate? Why can't we have a market rate? So it's an artificial system. It's a monopoly, and it's do as you're told, and that's what it is. It's a cartel, and we gave them their charter to do it. I mean, why can't Congress and the American people get behind revoking their charter and return the power of the purse strings, to our elected representatives as opposed to an unelected cartel? I mean, did you ever vote for a chairman of the Federal Reserve? I never have. I would like that opportunity.
Hold on, American, though. I understand the argument behind it being a cartel and that, but do you think that giving that money being issued by decree of Congress is a sensible alternative? I mean, yes, they're democratically elected, but can you imagine the shenanigans?
But I would rather
in the way money creation.
I would rather own the personal responsibility of that debt and not have this double jeopardy or this, uh, you know, opportunity to do currency manipulation. I mean, there's no ethics, there's no morals. It's literally $1 billion an hour. That's what they're spending, but they're only taking in, a fraction of that. So it's none of this is in the Constitution. It's not in our primary charter. We're doing a lot of extra shit that there's absolutely no authority to do. And we seem to have given away the authority as if it's a right or they're guaranteed this. There's no guarantees to these authorities. It is the will of the people.
So who do you think's more at fault here? If we had to point blame, would you throw it all the way back to Woodrow Wilson and the creation of these systems, or would you blame Nixon for taking us off the gold standard?
No, basically, philosophically speaking, now is this compression. So the Constitution wasn't written in 1776. It's written now. The Charter for the Federal Reserve is written now. All these things can be changed now. And so I think, with Nixon and the gold reserve, the interesting thing about Nixon is if you look at the stock market growth, Nixon is the only U.S. president that the stock market didn't have a positive year and great growth. Clinton had the greatest growth. So what does that tell you? The Federal Reserve was doing quantitative easing, is most likely doing quantitative easing during the greatest stock market growth periods, which is the inflation of the money supply. Only under Nixon did the stock market not have a great, annual return on investment. It's because he didn't inflate the money supply. So there's a lot of illusion when it comes to the stock market. If the Federal Reserve wants to increase the money supply, they just start buying equities and everybody's portfolio goes up and then people start liquidating and getting cash out. So there's a lot of manipulation that the Federal Reserve does. And when they tell Congress, don't give us monetary policy advice and we won't give you fiscal advice, this is a private cartel. It's totally in the shadows. All these meetings, none of this is on the record. They have no transparency and they're totally shielded from elected representatives doing any kind of forensic auditing or accounting on their behalf. They don't have an outside accounting firm or an auditor coming in to audit them because they control the politics. This is why I say it all goes back to political communication. The dollar is really a network of communication. The dollar is a communication instrument primarily. The Federal Reserve creates nothing. They don't manufacture anything. So what are they really doing as an organization? They are a communication organization. That's their primary goal. That's what they really do, which is communication. And Chairman Powell has some he has bad moments where he lets shit slip and he's angry and he's basically, he pretends like he's this robot that just says these are our primary tools of intervention. Have you ever heard him speak? He speaks, it's politically accommodating for him to speak like a robot, to pretend like he's not even a real human being. Because if he slips up and he gets angry and he gets frustrated and all that kind of lets the American people know like something here isn't right. That this doesn't seem to be natural. This isn't organic. This isn't in our founding charter and in our Constitution. So again, that's why I say now is all important. We need to put the spotlight on the Federal Reserve and flood it with light so we can get more transparency into who they are, what they're doing, and the syndicate with the Congress. I mean, this is like a RICO trial. Like, all these fuckers should be brought up on RICO charges for being involved in a conspiracy. They're spending money that we're not taking in, and we're not voting for this. It's totally unrepresentative taxation. It's anti-American. It's anti-constitutional. I mean, I'm not even a fucking lawyer, but this is my opinion.
Adam, what do you?
I mean, yeah, it's a bloody mess. I think debt jubilees are interesting ideas. I don't understand West's, and this goes back to ancient times, the West's infatuation was serving the creditor class at all costs. We're willing to bankrupt individuals, communities, states, nation states to serve these interests. It was common practice to have debt jubilees. Sometimes it was it was periodical, over several decades, maybe even 75 years, or when a king or a monarch would die, there would be a debt jubilee. These were fairly common practices, but in the West, we've been resistant to this idea, and we've been captured and basically in service to a creditor class almost in perpetuity since time immemorial. And I don't know. I understand that, this is, the system will fail, and how will anyone, how will capital be created and lent and distributed and all this stuff. But I think we're so far down the rabbit hole. I think we do need to think outside the box. I don't think resetting and having limitations on timelines of debt is necessarily the worst case scenario here. I think we're beholden to these interests, and we self-sacrifice in order to serve them, and I think it's foolish.
Let me say one thing. I don't know if any of you have ever done sports book betting, but I know somebody here in Chicago that had a private book, and I witnessed the immoral behavior that happens when you have a private debt book. And so try to view it from the perspective, the Federal Reserve is a bookie. And as Americans and our elected representatives, we keep going back to this bookies and saying, listen, can I borrow I want to borrow more money. And the bookie's like, you want to borrow more? Okay, great. We'll lend you more. No problem. The Federal Reserve will always continue to loan our government this money that we vote on in these acts and in these omnibus bills. So again, this is like a gambling addiction problem that we have as voters, as citizens, as constituents. We have to stop going to the bookie and cut all business relationships and ties with this bookie that is more than happy to continue lending to us. I mean, I think that's probably a good reframe and a good way to try to understand this very toxic relationship between our Congress, our government, which continues to borrow daily, hourly with the Federal Reserve as if they're an addicted gambler. But the last piece of that is, if you believe that the Federal Reserve is nothing more than a communication organization, well, okay, well, the problem is when a bookie wants to collect and you don't have the money, they're going to give you death threats, and you're going to have to go to friends and family and say, please lend me this money. Otherwise, this bookie is going to break my hand or kill me. So, if you believe that Hollywood story about a bookie. Anyways, I'm just saying, I don't know what the results will be. That's why I say it's possible there's resolution, and this is all just a fucking Ponzi scheme and fictitious. But nobody's going to get hurt because the government or the United States of America isn't going to collapse because Washington, D.C. is never going to get invaded. That's why I'm saying it's like if we do kick the can down the road, it's detriment. I've heard people on this app, international investors, complain about our budget because they're like, yeah, you're cutting into my investment now with your inflation, and you guys are getting the biggest benefit of it. But the thing is, a lot of the money that Congress is allocating is not coming back to we the people. It's not giving us jobs. It's not giving us economic opportunity. It's giving a lot of international organizations that opportunity with the money. And we can't stop sending money overseas. Jordan, Egypt, everybody's still getting a cut of this budget. So to me, it's traitorship. How the fuck are we sending Jordan $500 million and Egypt, $100 billion? I mean, what the State Department sends out annually, thank God it's been cut, but to give Ukraine $50 billion in more weapons from our arsenal. Maybe we don't need the weapons and we just make new weapons. I'm just saying, the more we can accurately describe the situation and the relationships, the sooner we can stop borrowing and spending and run this business, at an optimal rate.
I think it's hard for people to want to engage with public policy in a responsible, realistic way. And maybe that's the first change that has to happen. I think we've become too used to dealing with public policy in terms of these big themes, liberation and whatever else, and not really thinking about like, oh yeah, the public policy is mostly about running an economy, But I'm not sure how to refocus people on that.
I think they need the tough love. We have to tell them that Medicare and Social Security someday are both going away.
Well, why do people on the side, oh, I paid 20 years into Medicare. That's my right. It's not like they're getting a cash payout. Like Social Security, you could at least, you could calculate your ROI, but you can't even calculate an ROI with the Medicare, Medicaid. And the fact that people put all this money into Social Security, I don't know if you saw that in the big beautiful bill. There's this provision, and Scott Bessent of the Treasury says that it's a backdoor to end Social Security because they're giving all newborns $1,000 investment in like some kind of federal S&P 500 tracking account. I don't know who is the service provider on that, 401k, but the point is, that could be the beginning of getting people off of future Social Security liabilities, or doing away with it altogether. So it's a possibility, but it is, at $1 trillion a year. I mean, that's serviceable. We're taking in 5 trillion. Okay, so we're kicking back out $1 trillion in Social Security. But Medicare and Medicaid, that's the big one. And that's where we're not really getting a good return on our investment at $2 trillion. The health outcomes suck. Nobody goes to the gym. Nobody eats right. Everybody's on their fucking cell phone 24/7. Everybody is obese. Everybody has a clot shot. And we're just going to keep dumping $2 trillion into a healthcare system that doesn't work. And why is the government creating the healthcare system to begin with? This is not the way that reality should be. Government and taxation and spending and borrowing shouldn't create health marketplaces and health exchanges. The government should not be in this business of funding these organizations. It's to me, it blows my fucking mind how we got to where we're at now, that the government is the sole provider of all of these economies. It's insane. I don't understand how we got here, but it's obvious we got here because of the Federal Reserve and our ability to continue creating insane budgets annually. The King of England doesn't necessarily have the same ability that we do. I don't know if you've ever seen how the Queen or the King presides over their budget. He's got his royal scepter and he says, the annual fucking budget is going to be $2 trillion. Next year it's anticipated to be 2.1 trillion. It's a little different. They don't have this huge credit card terminal that we seem to have with the Federal Reserve. But the question is, who's in control of this credit card terminal? Is it your elected representative or is it a consortium of global interests? It's the fucking global interests that are controlling our purse strings.
Well, I mean, they'll always be a factor as long as they own our debt, and they own our debt basically to pay for stuff from us or other people because of dollar denomination and stuff like that. I mean, are you saying the Bank of England is different? It doesn't have the same leeway or latitude? I mean, central banks have a lot of leeway.
No, I mean, the fact that our dollars, if you look at the total amount of dollars in circulation globally, they don't even come close in terms of pounds. So we have this huge monopoly with the dollar. I think the best way to say that debt resolution comes about is really through a political communication. And trying to get good deals for we the people. I mean, I think Trump is the guy to get us good deals, but I think he's also a runaway, spendaholic. I mean, we got COVID-19 Heroes Act, CARES Act with him. So he didn't say, "Oh, we need, there was this national emergency. We got to spend another trillion, another 3 trillion, 2 more trillion." I mean, to keep the economy afloat, but we haven't gotten off of that heroin addiction. 40% of our economy is still borrowed. That's an artificial economy. If we cut the spending and cut the borrowing, the economy completely disappears. It's almost like the vig or the profit, from this asset or from this investment is the $2 billion or the $2 trillion that they borrow on our behalf to fund the budget. That's 2 trillion of pure profit annually. You have to try to rationalize or try to compare the budget to, let's say, Microsoft at a $4 trillion market cap. If we're spending 7 trillion a year, I mean, do you realize how big Microsoft is globally and what that is in terms of the global communication grid and productivity, et cetera? Like, you can't just you can't the amount of money that the government is spending is it's inordinate. It's insane. It's so fucking huge, but the whole economy rests upon it. It's a huge fake fucking economy. It's one giant Ponzi scheme essentially globally, or if you just focus on the US, it is a fucking Ponzi scheme.
Well, I mean, it's all backed by real goods in the end. I mean, people get their iPhones, they get their North American Angus, they get their Ford Fiestas. The, the real things really do happen.
Well, you ever see the movie Casino with Joe Pesci? They had a skim going, and that's pretty much what's happening. Is there is a skim happening at the casino, and it's the Federal Reserve and their associated banks. I mean, they're chucking out $1 trillion a year. We're paying $1 trillion on the interest. That's going to a lot of international lenders. I'm not anti-bank. I like bankers. I wish I was more juiced into the banking industrial complex. I worked in financial services as a financial advisor for Morgan Stanley Smith Barney. It's my first job out of college. I wish I would have stayed in there. I had no idea how good the opportunities were. But I'm not trying to be some kind of patriot to destroy, the banking industrial cartels and the banking industrial complex. I'm just saying that if you're running in politics, this should be your number one issue. I was telling Black Lives Matter people, you're protesting the wrong people in the wrong organization. Your dumbasses should be at the Federal Reserve doorstop, preventing people from going into work at the Federal Reserve facilities around the country. That's your real enemy if you believe in all this white structural racism bullshit that you propagandize. So I'm just all I'm trying to do is be intelligent and accurately describe the players or the situation and try to come up with optimal solutions that work for everybody. I think that's fair.
Well, Mojo, what do we do? What do you say to that?
In the Fed.
What do we replace it with? How should the
Nothing.
central bank?
Nothing.
No central bank.
I have.
So, well, hold on. So no central bank, Mojo. So
Correct.
We're just gonna go back to the Jews. Is that what it's gonna be? Straight up, unintermediated. The Jews in London, all of their gold. That's what it'll be. The banking system. He left, and he's pulling his leg.
I have an old currency note, and it's printed by the Republic of Chicago or the Bank of the Republic of Chicago. It's not printed by Federal Reserve. So that monopoly, that I think that would be the way, Jason, to replace the Fed is to remove their monopoly on printing dollars, or go back to a gold standard and have it fixed to actual gold. I mean, what do you think about that, Jason?
I mean, it's not good to fix to gold because you need more currency than you have gold, basically. The currency supply really has to do with the amount of trade that you have going. But what you're talking about with the Chicago Reserve or whatever is an intermediate step. But I'm not sure it would be a stable situation. Just say if you have this kind of government entity issuing money, I mean, eventually that's going to get all under the control of the government as a whole. You know, in the same way that, I mean, we have police forces all over the country, but to some degree or another, they're centralized in their training and doctrine. And that's just gradually become more the case, you know. Like a decentralized system, I was sort of joking about the Jews and their gold, but the way the English system worked actually was not Jews, but was goldsmiths in London. That's like the root of the Bank of England. Why? Because, well, you can give them notes and they can issue you notes that they back with gold. They know how to store gold. They have a lot of gold. There's a lot of gold around, you know, and so that's a safe place to issue notes out of. And that's the kind of the origin of banking as we know it. Has to do with the issuing of these notes at market fairs and things like that. Because people don't want to carry around all this stuff to every stall in the market. So, but then you end up with a bunch of private banks, right? Do we want to privatize the currency issuing holding function? I mean, there are massive problems with that.
Well, you know, I think this is basically art, to tell you the truth. I don't think that the system will change, and I think the status quo is like 99.99% guaranteed. But I still like find it fun to try to do, you know, thought maximization or creative uh, ways to suggest alternative ways to grow, you know, grow the economy, start new. I mean, if we can start new businesses, why can't we start a new country? You know, like I don't know. I mean, there should be an alternative opportunity for people to invest in a new, you know, separated future from this Social Security number index. So I don't know. There seems to me like we should have tax-free economic opportunity zones. You know, 50 years of tax-free growth opportunities in certain states. You know, maybe within the interior. You know, and fund it for $100 billion and plant 10 new cities in this country. Because if you look at the top cities in China and you look at the annual budgets of the top 20 cities in China and you compare it to the top budgets of like New York City, LA, we spend like 1/10 of what they're spending in Chinese cities. And I don't know if this is because of their communism, but just compare the budgets of the top 10 US cities to the top 10 Chinese cities, and you'll be like, I mean, I know there's a lot more people, but how the fuck can they still spend 10x what our city budgets are? That to me was like a crazy metric. I can't, I don't know what they're spending all the money on, if it's all just salaries or subsidies. But welcome to the room, Dr. Vadim.
Hello, hello. Yeah, I mean, I think you know, your picture of tax-free zone or country, for that matter, is very inspiring. But I think, you know, I'm totally for it. But I think it's much more political decision than economical. I mean, call me cynic, but I think the fundamental problem of democracy is that, you know, sorry to be rude, but most of the people in democracy are leeches. They basically are freeloaders. They have political power to vote, to dictate taxation policies, and they are not the least interested in tax-free zones because that means that they cannot basically suck the money out of other people. And that's where we stand right now. And I don't really see the easy way out. I mean, maybe some totally far-fetched ideas like creating an independent country on Mars for, you know, a few hundred years from now, but I just don't see that to be realistic anywhere in any practical foreseeable future.
Well, you know, little fleas on big fleas. America and its banking cartel, aka the Federal Reserve, is the big flea. And there's so many little fleas all around the world that, you know, are subsidized or essentially just, you know, secondary third parties of the primaries. So It's easy to call people parasites, but when you yourself are a parasite to a certain perspective, I mean, if you're like an androcyte on the earth or something, that's what I'm saying. Like, don't poo-poo parasites because it turns out the host is also a parasite. It's not just the parasite that's a parasite. What do you think about that, Vidyam?
It's a technical term. It's not for lack of compassion or understanding. It's just I'm talking about the economical, like say the money flow or the wealth creation flow. I can say that I'm a parasite because I work for a rich corporation that pays me well, but at the same time they have a good reason to do that. So it's hard to say who's a parasite. I mean, I don't think of myself as a parasite. I pay my taxes.
Yeah, it could be projection, but I just like the thought about, parasites and host, and sometimes maybe you don't know which one you are in the relationship. How do you view like American corporations, like founded by Americans, across all the categories versus like international corporations working in the US, or even Google, or let's say, Microsoft having so many Indian and H-1B visa key executives, top software developers? Isn't that just like the efficient market economy and the most efficient model for growth and opportunity is this kind of like international management of primary US based corporations? Like, what's the is there a like a is there a critique of, I guess, Indian in Indians in key positions in major US corporations?
Well, I'm not the economist. I'm at best a good amateur. Uh, and, I like Thomas Sowell, for example. I basically agree with most of what he has to say. So I can imagine that he would say, whatever is driven by pure economic mechanisms is probably good. Whatever is free from the government coercion is good. So if things are, if it's laissez-faire capitalism and it just flows naturally, then it's probably good. My only concern about this line of thought is that, as the economist, he's not a psychologist and he's not a historian. I think when we talk about civilizations and their long-term perspectives and long-term survival, I think the economic mechanism and economic reasoning is not the only one that should be taken into account. So I believe in such a thing as, the way, so Thomas Sowell goes as far as saying, if it's more profitable to outsource and use some foreign companies, it's financially cheaper. I think he literally said that somewhere like basic economics. It's financially cheaper to basically put people on welfare in your own country. If you just simply count the dollars and count the money flow, you decide, well, actually we can afford to put them on welfare. Well, I happen to disagree with that because I think if you take into account the human psyche, the whole level of demoralization and degradation that you can, impose on the whole nation can be so dangerous that if you think of the long-term survival of this nation, it's horrific. So yeah, I absolutely believe that a certain level of protectionism is absolutely necessary, even if it goes against the immediate profit or even economic development. I think it's important to have all American companies. I think it's important to hire more Americans, and probably, yes, you have to pay them more than you would pay Indians or Chinese otherwise, but that's just basically essential. I think we just have some, I would say, ideological or political to offer to the world, and I would like this project to continue on for as long as it possibly can. So, yeah, that's my.
So, do you have a critique of a fiat-based society, fiat-based, currency, and uh, how do you rationalize, you know, I guess, unethical currency manipulation?
I don't. I don't. I really can't. I literally can't find no excuse for it. How about you?
I like the saying, "There's not a speck of dust out of place in the whole universe." Um, and I also like the saying, "To know all is to forgive all." So, you know, you never know till you know. And it's easy to think that somebody is a snake in the grass, but you also don't know that person's wisdom or experiences. And until you really meet somebody, um, who has like an incredible presence, you hope the ethics match up with that person's presence, meaning it's like a perfect person. Um, but, again, you don't know till you know. So I'm just saying that I like my analogy of the Federal Reserve being a bookie, having their own platform to lend and to engage in arbitrage or gambling or speculative transactions. And it's nice to think that, Chairman Powell is the face of our Federal Reserve. But there's a lot of people that he knows, and that he associates with. It's a big world. I just live in my little bubble. I don't know billionaires in France. I don't know billionaires in Germany. I don't know billionaires in Italy. I don't know billionaires from Russia. But, you know, if you are that upper crust and you are that wealthy, I'm sure you have a role in the relationships or the communication. And I'm just saying, how un-American is the Federal Reserve if we believe it's this, parasite, a specter, or a shadow cartel, or a shadow Congress? Um, I'm just saying, if you were on the inside, you might not. I've met people that worked at Federal Reserve, and they're PhDs. They're basically academics, and they spend a lot of time doing research. But to me, it just seems like a jobs program. They're not really creating anything. So that's why I say I think it's primarily a communication organization, a research organization. But they really do have, tools, mechanisms, levers to pull, buttons to push. They, in many ways, control the economy, or they're fixing a standard of what they believe is an optimal model. And it's easy to get angry about anything. But that's why I say, I'm just trying to accurately describe the situation, for political purposes primarily, but hopefully to awaken people uh, to a taxation crisis and a debt and borrowing and spending
That would
crisis.
produce vehicles. What's that? Go ahead. I think I lost you.
So, Vadim, what I'm trying to say is I don't have anything to say other than, I'm just a little fish in a little pond in a big ocean. And, I'm trying to analyze the entire ocean, but, I'm still just looking at my little pond. So take it all with a grain of salt.
No, that's fair enough. I mean, me too. No billionaire friends for sure. But I invest like 60% of Americans last time I checked. So in that sense, I'm more typical than atypical, and I see that generally speaking, investment allows me to preserve my savings and overall beat the inflation and even maybe get ahead. But I also understand that technically speaking, the central bank as the Federal Reserve is something that basically it's a legalized theft of our money by printing more currency. That's what it is. And so for those Americans who don't invest, I can only imagine like this 40%, let's say, they literally keep their money in the bank and they see how every freaking year the value of their money goes down, 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 down. And that's number one. And the second thing, which I find important, is just I see to what extent the Federal Reserve is used and central bank is used as a political tool, basically, to manipulate the electorate. And I just can't imagine that healthy economy would even allow such manipulation, which means that probably there is something deeply unhealthy about our system.
There's a program here at Singer Wealth that does it down in South Florida, and he broke down that for the average person that inherits, let's just say they did an easy number of $1 million, and they had to wait, and I don't remember, it wasn't that many years, but they were going to try to live on that. In that short period of time coming up, its true value will only be $750,000, even with their modest interest rates, right? So they lose $250,000 plus in value, in true value. And so, investing, he was basically explaining, even getting into some conservative investments is the only way to even try to stay ahead of just the average, cost of living increase, let alone with, everything else that's potentially, out there. I had somebody who blew a lid because of the tariffs, pulled out 1/3, or he lost 1/3 of his retirement. So he pulled a whole bunch out, put it in somewhere conservative. And I told him, you're crazy. It's going to come back. He was mad as hell about Trump, this, that, and the other, cussing about it. And I was just being calm. And I was like, no, listen, let's see where it's at in 6 months. And then he'll tell me, I want you to sit down and ask yourself. I'm not going to say I told you so, but ask yourself if the panic sell was a good deal. Now we're higher than we've ever been. And it's, to me, it's another transfer of wealth. They panic sell the middle Americans and under to jump out, and the 1% starts buying. Everything is a transfer of wealth. You're saying like them printing money. It is. When they print money, you're taking wealth from the ones that have their money sitting in a bank account.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. It's, to me, it just seems awful suspicious that it's happening the way it does, and the media does zero to help the people. There's nobody out there preaching stop, hold steady. They're all panic, and somebody's got to get a grasp on teaching these people stop. The history's there; it shows you. It'll tank, then it comes back. I explained this to the guy. I said, "No, go look back under Obama, under Biden. There was a bigger drop. Did you pull out?" Well, no. I was like, you pulled out because you were told to panic. I said, because it was a bigger drop, but you didn't even really know about it probably. You still don't know about it, And he didn't. And I was like, and that's the narrative.
See, this is why I think a lot of the Federal Reserve and the borrowing and the spending conversation is actually just political, because Peter, what's his name? Peter Lynch or Peter Schiff, he thinks that gold stocks are undervalued, by 90%, meaning like he thinks gold stocks are going to go up 10x to 100x. But that would only happen if we went back to a gold standard and we had like an open market rate on the conversion. So it's unlikely, but the point is he still wins as a financial advisor by taking your assets under management and putting them into his gold mutual fund or his portfolio management platform. So he wins either way on the communication, and by being the antagonist or the contrarian to the fiat system, he attracts a lot of people who like his economic content and philosophy. But the point is he still wins because he's the broker. So anyways, I'm just saying that I think the status quo is always going to be in the future. There might be modifications, but I would say that I don't know. I don't think anybody knows what the outcome of all this borrowing and spending is going to be, because we could look at historical examples, from the 40s or the 30s. But does America have a special arrangement or situation because of its geographic proximity, its expansion? Is history likely to repeat itself, or it's just a drawn out process? So I'm just saying, keep smiling, because nothing, and nothing is miserable.
Well, if you think about the blockchain currency, right? Say Bitcoin, there is by definition limited supply of it, so it's inflation free.